Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Henry Gilroy, co-executive producer of Star Wars Rebels. You're listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Welcome, everyone, to Aggressive Negotiations, that little point in the universe that's farthest from the middle of the galaxy. I'm just one of your hosts, Matthew Rushing, Master Matthew Rushing, and with me, as he is always, the incredibly talented, wonderfully bald John Mills.
I am wonderfully bald. That is absolutely
I'm looking at
true.
it right now, man, and I'm in awe.
Yeah, I'm getting a little shaggy on the sides. There's like
you got that Picard thing going from season 1.
I do.
You know?
I really don't like it. I'm dead honest. I really don't like it. I got lazy this week, and I'm ashamed. This is my lazy look. I look like a hippie compared to how I usually look. So,
well, if you want to check out, what maybe John looks like, maybe we'll screenshot him and put that out on the internet. Okay, no, we won't.
No, we won't.
But
no,
you can
I live
find
in the
us
shadows
on social media at Join Nerd Party. That's the entire network's Twitter account, and then we have the Jedi Masters. Both of those Twitter accounts you can follow. Great places to check out. You know, there's so much happening these days in nerd news, so Star Wars or otherwise. So make sure you follow both of those places, and we love talking to you over there. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/thenerdparty. Great place to talk to John and I. We love interacting with you about the shows that we do. People comment there. We definitely comment back. We really enjoy getting emails. Go over to thenerdparty.com/contact, choose a show, and choose Aggressive Negotiations, and that will come to John and I, and we'll be able to converse with you that way. And then you can find all the shows that we do here in the network for the Nerd Party over on iTunes. And while you're there, man, hit us up with a star rating and review. It really helps our show grow. There are so many Star Wars podcasts out there. And if you like what we do here on Aggressive Negotiations, help other people find the show by giving us that review. We'd really appreciate it. And so, John, as we're recording this today, we are actually recording the 9th of November, 2017, and I wanted to ask, usually we talk about some poll that we've done, but we had some big news come out, and I figured, we honestly really haven't even talked about it. We haven't had a chance to, because it literally just came out a few hours ago that... One, we have a live-action TV show that's going to be coming that's going to premiere on the new Disney, whatever their service is going to be. And on top of that, Rian Johnon, who directed The Last Jedi, is going to be doing a brand new trilogy. But this trilogy is not 10, 11, and 12. It is a trilogy outside the Skywalker saga. So I got to ask you, what do you think of the news?
Highly intriguing. I can only guess that what Rian Johnon is delivering with The Last Jedi, because as we record this, we obviously haven't seen it yet, that what Johnson is delivering to us with Episode 8, this is such a vote of confidence about how good it is that I am a little bit taken aback, because this is basically a huge vote of confidence from Disney that they've basically knighted him George Lucas Jr. They basically said, this story's yours now. You do this. You make this happen. And I can't help but immediately think about the fact that J.J. Abrams, who's the golden child who, brought Star Wars back supposedly with The Force Awakens, made the $2 billion. It's, hey, J.J. Abrams did it, and he's coming in and he's taking over Episode 9. They didn't tap him. They tapped Rian Johnon. So I got to be honest, but beyond any trailer that they could show me, beyond any buzz that I could read, this has me really intrigued about The Last Jedi, because this means there's something super special in there. And frankly, it makes me more excited. What was your reaction?
Well, I think the most interesting thing about this is that, like you said, it's not a vote of confidence in him. It is a vote for supreme confidence in Rian Johnon. I mean, again, the fact that we were talking about this in a group that's a bunch of people that I've gone to Dragon Con with, and we have a little group one of the guys who listens to this show, and he'll know who it is. I'm not going to mention him, but he was like, I don't understand why everybody's so excited. We haven't even seen episode 8 yet. We don't know if it's any good. But obviously, Disney and Kathleen Kennedy believe that Rian Johnson is, as you said, the anointed George Lucas of the next generation, and has done something so special that they are willing to place all of their, Star Wars eggs in his basket and allow it to hopefully, flourish with more porgs.
Yes, the porg eggs have been laid.
So
don't count your porg eggs before they're hatched, Matt.
Right. Well, and this is the thing that I think is fantastically interesting. This is not going to be something where we're continuing the Skywalker saga. This is going to be in a place, they said, in a part of the galaxy we haven't really explored before.
Yay.
So you have so much open here, but it leaves so many questions. And I think, as another friend I was talking to today said, he's cautiously optimistic, and I find myself in that same camp, And I think for those of us that are fans who have kind of had some ups and downs with the buyout and everything, I think once we see The Last Jedi, this news may become something that's either of paramount importance to us that we can't wait for, or it's going to be something that's like, oh, really?
Yeah.
I think this is so interesting to announce this now instead of maybe in January, when maybe The Last Jedi is just a massive hit. People love it. Everybody loves it. And then you're like, okay, you loved what this guy did? Well, now you've got 3 more movies to look forward to by him.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense now. It makes sense now, too, why he wasn't given episode 9.
It's true.
Because everybody said, oh, well, wait, why didn't you give Rian Johnson episode 9 if episode 8's so great? Well, if they want him developing all of this material for them, you go and you concentrate on that. And, you're obviously going to be involved in this. The one thing I find very interesting about it is that there's no doubt, and it's even evident in, some of the subtextual commentary of his own work, that Lucas eventually came to feel trapped by Star Wars. Is Johnson making... I mean, this is a very interesting and bold decision for a filmmaker to make. He's committing to this. This is what his life is going to be. He doesn't have other stories like Looper or Brick that he wants to tell right now or take time off and do. I'm interested in the structure of it as to what the frequency is. Obviously, these aren't going to be delivered, one a year. So for me, there's a very interesting trap here that he may have laid for himself. And is he going to come out of this and at the end of it, he's going to be like, I'm done. I never want to touch this again. Or is he going to be fully in and invested in it? Is this something where, to borrow a line from, a character in another franchise, be careful what you wish for? You may get it. And so I just recently watched Looper. And there's no doubt to me that Rian Johnson is a very creative, innovative thinker and isn't afraid to take big risks with a story. And so from that perspective, all I can hope is with them going away from the Skywalker saga, and this is a different type of trilogy, is that he is pursuing a path similar to what Lucas did with the Clone Wars, where he said, yeah, it's Star Wars, but I'm telling different types of stories.
Well, and the most interesting thing, too, is that, he's set to write and direct the first one of these, but it doesn't say anything about the second 2. So my guess is that he's got the story in his mind, and, he's going to be working with his this collaborator that he's been working with for a long time, Ram Bergman, to create this, and that they'll have, then maybe subsequent people come in to do the next 2, but there we, my guess is they're probably based on, he could continue to write the scripts for them. He just might not direct them, maybe like Lucas in, A New Hope, right, and then passing off the other 2. So, I think to me, again, it makes me cautiously optimistic especially for the fact that they have such supreme confidence in this guy that they're giving him the reins to Star Wars, basically, especially with the rocky road that they've had with, Rogue One and, of course, even rockier road with Solo. I think they were like, no, we've got a guy who understands this, and it also kind of reminds me of Dave Filoni in a lot of ways. Dave is a guy who I think would do Star Wars for the rest of his life if he could,
Yeah.
Maybe Rian Johnon, like you were saying, he is so excited to be in this world and he has so many great ideas that to him, it's not a loss to not do another Looper. It would be a loss to not do more Star Wars, which I totally understand.
Sure.
It's freaking Star Wars. So,
Sure.
what are you thinking about, real quickly, the live action TV show? Do you think this will have anything to do with all the scripts they got lying around for Lucas, or do you think it's something totally different?
It would be nuts if it didn't. Why wouldn't you use that material? I mean that sincerely. Like, you've got this material laying around. Why wouldn't you mine it for gold?
I mean, what?
Because it's obviously
wasn't it like
there.
50 scripts or something they had already?
Right. Which, again, it's a victim to the fact that it was written at a time before shows were 8-episode seasons.
Right.
Like Lucas was thinking 24-episode seasons, and it's like, nowadays that's easily 5 seasons of a show right there.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think they'd be nuts not to use those scripts. Don't you?
I can't imagine not using pieces of it. The most interesting thing is that we know the time period, and do they really want to continue to mine that time period? Since Rebels has been there, and we've had Rogue One there, and that's the most interesting part about it. Is or do you use like ideas from it and then put it in a different time period? So I think that's the most interesting thing, honestly. The question for me becomes, what's Filoni doing next? That's really what I care about on TV. I want to know what Filoni's doing next with Star Wars, because if they're not giving Filoni more animation or something else, maybe they're transitioning to him to live action, which is, hell yeah!
Yeah.
So, I mean,
yes,
because I can't imagine him not running something Star Wars.
I do not want to picture a Star Wars franchise that doesn't have Filoni doing something in it.
No.
I really don't.
No.
Is it possible that could be the case? Sure. Does it mean I'll stop being a fan? Not necessarily, but at the same time, I don't know. I mean, I think he's so baked into the mythos. It has enough of his character in it by this point that it would be nuts to let him go. Dave
Filoni is like having Michael Jordan on the bench in his prime, and I mean on the bench.
Right.
And just keeping him there the whole game. It's ridiculous.
Right. Or, yeah. And he's just telling, every so often he's telling the coach, he's like, you might want to put this,
I'm just
move this around. So just put him on the court.
Just picturing Ace Ventura. Come on, coach, put me in. I know I can do it.
Well, right now I'm just picturing Dave Filoni doing that, that infamous picture of Jordan doing that giant dunk.
Oh,
like
with
where he's
the
like
cowboy
up in
hat
the air.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course he's wearing the cowboy hat.
Yeah, and
Come
the
on.
wolf t-shirt.
Yes, required. Thank you.
Something that you said the other day to me, as we're transitioning into the actual content of the show, we had to talk about it, but
of course,
and we're not really a news show, but it just actually literally happened today. So something you said to me was really interesting, and I never thought about this, but it got it going in my brain, this idea about droids. And you asked me, it's like, why don't droids get stolen?
And I have to give credit to a fellow co-host here on the Nerd Party Network, co-host of SETI Alpha 3. So if there are any Star Trek fans listening, and there's a Venn diagram that would suggest that if you're a Star Wars fan, you may also be a Star Trek fan. Darren Moser, who actually has been featured for his tremendous K2SO cosplay
it's so awesome.
droid. It's
so
pretty
awesome.
amazing, man. It is. I mean, it's pretty amazing. He asked this question. He said, hey, I have a thought. Why don't droids get stolen? And so I passed it on to you immediately because it's a good question. You have all of these droids walking around. Why doesn't somebody just droid jack them? Why don't they just pick them up and it's like, hey, look,
like
I need one of those droids.
Black market?
Well, I mean, the Jawas do that,
Yeah, that's
obviously.
true. Well, I mean, but they're scrounging the desert for things that they find out there. It's not as though we're like they're literally stealing droids from like homesteads that they go by.
They might. They could be, but on top of that, I mean, the thing is that has its own question baked into it, because how many droids are possibly wandering the desert? Was that a problem? Was that something? Did droids just,
well, I mean, I don't know. BB-8 was wandering around and got caught by one of the, so.
That's an excellent point, actually. But I mean,
droids
I
just
would,
falling from the sky,
right? Yeah, or just popping up out of Kelvin Ridge. Who knows? But I don't know, man. Like it's actually a really good question, because the thing is, we know there are restraining bolts that prevent droids from running away.
Right.
But what would prevent somebody? Like what? I think the basic question becomes, what are the ownership records like in Star Wars? Because it appears to be, at least on Tatooine, a lot looser than you would think. Is there some sort of thumbprint thing where if somebody comes and brings a claim to law enforcement or the Hutts and says, this person stole my droid, they can say, look, this has got the Lars thumbprint or blood sample in it. This is their droid, obviously.
See, that's interesting, because it brings me all the way back to episode 1, where Anakin's like, well, I'm building a protocol droid to help bomb. So it's obvious that not everybody can afford to have a droid, because it costs a certain amount of money to be able to have one, upkeep it, all of that kind of stuff. And so, Anakin is building one out of parts that he finds, or I guess takes from Watto's shop, or buys from Watto's shop, or finds just, lying around Mos Espa.
Yeah, I think it's established in the novelization, at the very least, that he is assembling 3PO from parts that he's scrounging from that Watto wouldn't notice were missing.
Yeah,
I think he does the pod racer the same way,
which is makes sense. There's a lot of junk lying around that place, and so I get it. So on having that as a fact that you can build your older droid, but how do you demarcate your droid as your droid so that other people know? I don't know. Like in the Return of the Jedi, when Luke says, "Here, I gift you these 2 droids." Obviously the droids don't have any say in that. So I mean, they're not really sentient, but it's kind of weird because C-3PO seems to have a certain amount of sentience to him, or is that just programming? I mean, we never really have that question. Is C-3PO a person? That's interesting in and of itself to me, because you mentioned the droids don't have a say in being gifted and those sorts of things, and you could argue that R2 has sort of a he's like Lassie. Lassie, what's the problem? Yeah. Oh, look, Leia's stuck in the well again, that sort of thing. But Han's stuck in carbonite. Quick, let's go. I think there's a somewhat uncomfortable question. I actually wrote a blog about this a long, long time ago. I wouldn't even know how to, I don't even know if it's still up or whatever. But in a sense, there's a very uncomfortable thing going on with Star Wars, because the droids do seem to have personalities, which would suggest a sentience level, which would therefore, because they're capable of independent, spontaneous thought, so there's some sort of intelligence there. So are droids slaves becomes an even more uncomfortable question, because you have to look into this. Obviously, R2 and 3PO are servants. They're a servant class. But is that in and of itself wrong once a droid reaches a certain threshold of intelligence? And is there some sort of threshold of intelligence that is there, or are we just watching droids as slaves and we just don't even think about it? Forgive me for comparing, but it reminds me of in Harry Potter with the house elves, where they are a servant class, but they are a race of beings that this is what they do.
Yeah.
But they can also be so mistreated and horribly mistreated that there's this whole side to it of them being treated as they are slaves instead of as if they are beings with feelings and with rights of their own. And so I wonder if there's kind of a correlation between the two, that droids are a servant class, but that people of normal moral behavior treat their droids well, and then people of abnormal moral behavior treat their droids like dirt, or worse. And that's where you get the ones where, you know, droids want to stay loyal to the, you know, the people that they serve, like R2, who obviously has a huge affinity for Anakin, and Anakin back for him, and then of course has the same feeling for lots of other people. I think, you know, Ahsoka comes into that. I think Obi-Wan, even though Obi-Wan's kind of dismissive sometimes to R2, I think he still has that towards Obi-Wan, and then of course he transfers that to Luke, you know, and Leia.
Yeah.
And so all of these things, like I think that's such a fascinating question, because it doesn't seem like Star Wars ever even broaches the question of whether or not droids are sentient, but it does seem that we get places where droids are seen as...
That's interesting you say that, because there is a point. There's a very specific point, and it's Dexter Jetster that addresses it, where he is criticizing the Jedi library droids. And he says that, you know, because he mentions how the droids don't know to look for the markings.
Oh, that's true.
And he says,
yeah.
I would think that you as a Jedi would know the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And extrapolating that, I mean, immediately you see there, I mean, there's definitely a parallel as well with Dune, because you have essentially a droid uprising of sorts. You have this droid army that that fights in the Clone Wars, which therefore explains people's demeaning attitude toward droids and the restraining bolts and the control of their behavior and those sorts of things. But there still seems to be a stratification of intellect or personality or freedom with droids, because you have a droid among the you have two droids among the bounty hunters, you know, looking for Solo in The Empire Strikes Back. So they're obviously free and going about, and they're their own people, you know, as it were. But then you have R2 and 3PO, who are their servant class, but then you have the mindless automata like the battle droids, although there's arguably an evolution, because, you know, when they went back and they reshot and changed some things in Attack of the Clones, they're more independent by the time they get to Attack of the Clones, and then, you know, you can progress along and the droids become more and more human. So is it something where the mind wipe becomes a determining factor, because the more memory a droid has seems to determine how much sentience or individual personality it has? That's
true. I think you are on to something, and I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the most sentient of droids is probably R2-D2,
or at least IG-88 and Zuckuss are right up there with him.
Yeah.
Although, I'm sorry, they changed his name to 4LOM over time. He'll always be Zuckuss to me.
4-LOM.
Well, 4-LOM was originally the short guy in the tan robes, because he was a special send-away figure in the 1980s, and then they changed it because they said 4-LOM makes more sense to have as the droid. But I could go on for hours about this, but they'll always be their original names to me.
You are right, because it creates this weird conundrum, because there's no clear answer then about how we look at or think about droids in the series. It seems to be that the opinion that you have of droids is the opinion that's given to you through their masters. So, you know, when you think of like Cassian and, K2SO, K2SO obviously, because of the reprogramming, kind of has his own weird, quirky personality. So that could be something about it too, that they are... Specific droids can be programmed by their masters to have more personality than not. And in a lot of ways, like in Interstellar, where he asked Tars, like, what's your humor level? It's at 90%. Well, let's bring that down to 75. Okay. Yeah. Or what's your honesty level? So let's bring that down to 90%, because 100% honesty is. So I wonder if that's kind of like when you get your brand new droid, does it have that where you walk through all the settings just like you have in your iPhone, and you kind of set the personality settings for your droid, and you either have it more with more personality, or you kind of set it up to be more as an automaton. And then depending on how you set it up, creates this structure that allows it to either have more sentience or less as it grows older.
But getting back to the original question that kicks this off is it still casts them in an uncomfortable way when you really drill down into this sort of slave class, which is troubling because let's say there is a free droid like 4LOM or IG-88 or C-3PO walking around, and they have achieved this level, this Buddhist level of enlightenment where they are suddenly intelligent droids that are equal to humans. But somebody says, well, I don't care, I'm going to take you. That gets you like into that, to make reference to another film, like 12 Years a Slave. The guy's just, walking around, and then they're just like, no, you match a description we're looking for, so we're going to, bring you in, that's what you're going to be. And so the droid could very easily find themselves right back where they were, and then the memory wipe takes away all of that from them. I mean, it's almost like I seem to think that I would love to see not a movie, but like maybe some of the TV series devoted to droids going through and examining these sorts of questions, these sorts of moral questions, because I definitely think also Star Wars is born in a time when mechanical engineering is still a very dominant mindset and computer engineering is just coming up. But now we're in the computer engineering AI mindset. A lot has changed in the last several decades. So I think that recasts the whole question, since the nature of how we understand machinery has changed over time.
And that creates a really interesting question, because in the end, are we putting on Star Wars something that it's not meant to have as a question? Because of the, like you said, coming from a different time perspective of that they're always going to be machines. Like there isn't this question, are we going to get an AI? That they're never, free as IG-88 is. He's still a slave to some kind of programming that can never be transcended, whatever that is. And therefore, he'll always be somebody who's just a created being, and he's never going to be a data, basically.
But see, this, I think, is a very interesting philosophical question in and of itself, because I think the answer to this reveals your own mindset about life itself, because there are people who would very easily say, oh, well, even as a human being, you're just a meat machine. You're trapped in your own thing. Like there are people arguing that free will doesn't exist. Well, if free will doesn't exist, all we are robots, and we can't be held accountable for our choices because it's been programmed into us from birth forward.
Right.
And I think that would be a really interesting story, I think, to pursue in this, about the nature of what makes humanity different than machinery. You mentioned the programming. IG-88 is an assassin droid. That is what he was built to be. IG-88, in order to demonstrate that he had achieved some level of sentience that would require approaching him the same way you would a human, IG-88 would have to say one day, I don't want to be an assassin droid. I'm going to go out and I'm going to be a farmer. Because there are people who do that. And that I think actually, you know what? I'll make reference back to the Clone Wars. That demonstrates the difference between the living being and the droid. Is you're never going to see a super battle droid or a battle droid go off and quit the army and become a farmer. But you see a clone trooper do that.
Right.
And say, nope, I'm out. I am not going to do this. And you see clone troopers like Captain Rex go in and say, oh, there's a chip that's going to make me do something. Oh, well, I'm going to take that out. Thank you very much. So I think that question has actually been explored, but I would like to see it explored further. I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah.
I would love to see something where a droid has hit that sort of point and gets captured and put into service, and they're like, no, you can't do this to me. Like that would be a very interesting sort of commentary thing to watch happen.
Well, and I like what you're saying, because I do think that it creates the main question, which is a question of worldview. And I think where I personally come from in this is that anything we create, droid or otherwise, is never going to be able to reach sentience, because it will lack a soul.
Well, it'll be a behavior imitator.
Right. Exactly. So it
You know,
will never
it'll be a
have
slave to its
true
programming.
sentience then.
Right. There will always be a cap on its behavior. There will always be something. It becomes, the argument becomes, what kind of Turing test can we put in place that demonstrates that it made a decision that is completely spontaneous, that goes against its programming, because humans do that all the time. There are, I know that it's a very seductive worldview to say that people are simply, there's no such thing as free will. We're all trapped by this. And I think it's a very seductive and a very simple worldview to have. I'm not calling anybody simple who has this worldview, but I disagree with it because I know that myself, I am living proof of somebody who was making decisions and doing things and changed everything about that. And because I hit a point where I said, this isn't working. This is what I thought was life. This is what I, based on how I was raised, all of these sorts of things, I have decided to do different than that. And I think that it's almost like there's a Batman versus Joker in the Dark Knight sort of conversation going on here. What do you believe about life and its nature? And can droids ever hit that point where you have that discussion about them?
Yeah, it's interesting because it reminds me of in Wonder Woman where Steve says, maybe it's not about what we deserve. Maybe it's about what we believe, and you have to ask yourself that question is, what do you believe in? And I think the deepest questions become about what we believe about life, how it began, where it comes from, and all of those things. And when we get to that kind of story, when we get those answers, then we can really truly be able to, we're getting super deep here, but I really think that that's the thing. Like, you have to be able to answer those questions before you can answer the question of, are droids sentient? Do we need to worry about this kind of thing? And I think regardless of whether a droid is sentient, I think the way that we treat whatever it is that we own or take care of reflects on who we are as a person. So how people treat inanimate objects like a droid that has some kind of personality, or whether it has a lot to do with who they are. And I think, say Anakin putting a lot of anthropomorphic feelings into R2 has a lot to do with how R2 turns out. You have somebody more like Obi-Wan, I think, who's just kind of more in touch with what is living. And so for him, something like that is always just going to be a thing. Now, he doesn't mistreat his droids, but he doesn't treat them with extra affection like an Anakin does. Right.
I think that's a great and relevant point. And I would also like to say that any Star Wars fan sort of, feeling a little nervous about this sort of thing and how would I treat a droid and those sorts of things, look at the way you treat your toy collection. I think that Star Wars fans are especially well suited to treating their droids very well, based on how they treat their inanimate objects, because we all lavish a lot of attention and love on them. And so there you go. I think that Star Wars fans are in the clear on this one.
Yeah, no, man, that's such an interesting conversation. I'm really interested to think what other people feel about this. And so, hit us up again on social media and everything. We'd love to hear from you. John, if people want to talk to you about this or find out what else you got going on, where can they find you?
Oh, well, you can find me. I'm Castle Junkie. That's my nom de plume online. Feel free to send a message to me or tweet me or what have you. You can also find me here on the network co-hosting Great Shot Kid, and you can find me out there in the stranger, undefined corners of the universe, co-hosting Words with Nerds with my pal Craig. Matt, where can people find you?
Well, you could find me on Twitter, MattRushing02. You can find me on Instagram under the same name. I'm here on the network doing Owlpost with Drea Kaufman, as I mentioned, Harry Potter. So check out our Harry Potter podcast as we're walking through each and every chapter of the series, one chapter at a time. You can also find me on Trek FM as I'm doing The Orb with Chris Jones, talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And also, I do the General Geek Show over there, talking about all things geeky that we love. It's just a blast. I hope you'll check it out. In fact, I just recently talked about Thor Ragnarok with Lee Hutchinson, who's here on the network doing Filibuster. So great time.
Excellent conversation,
Yeah,
by the
thank you
way.
so much.
Really enjoyed it.
So love doing that. And then last but not least, doing Cinema Stories with my good friend Courtney as we talk about films through the lens of faith. But John, I think there's only one thing left to say. I think it's time to close negotiations.
Master Matthew, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.